I've been seeing videos recommended by YouTube that are suggesting that Muslims are leaving Islam in large numbers throughout the world because I guess they're being exposed to Western uh, pleasures and conveniences, or maybe information about Islam that they hadn't been exposed to previously. They're being exposed to like Christian missionizing and polemics, and that this is, I guess, causing Muslims to lose faith in their religion in shocking numbers. And I don't know if these reports are just wishful thinking, um, or whether they're true. I mean, I've kind of suspected that um, Western governments, that their strategy in dealing with Islamic expansionism is to expose them to like atheistic argumentation or atheist propaganda, um, or Christian polemics, in hopes that they can, I guess, westernize Islam before Islam gains the majorities in Western nations that would lend itself, I guess, to Islamic world domination. I'm speaking off the cuff here, so I don't have any notes or anything that I'm going by. Anyway, I get grieved in my soul, I guess you could say, when I see videos where Muslim monotheists are being converted to Christian idolatry. Now, the Jewish opinion on Christianity's idea of Jesus as an intermediary or a mediator is that this constitutes a shituf, S-H-I-T-U-F, and that while a shituf is not allowed for Jews in their worship, in their monotheistic worship of the deity of the Bible, I'm speaking of the Jewish Bible, not the Christian one. I guess their opinion is that it may be permissible for non-Jews to worship the Creator through a shituf. And I don't know if that's an allowance, like they're saying, Gentiles are idiots, so we'll just allow them to worship the Creator through a shituf. But I guess there's another opinion that Christianity is idolatry, but that may be that Christianity is idolatry for the Jew because you would be worshiping the Creator through a shituf, an intermediary or a mediator. Anyway, I think most of us who have come out of Christianity we regard Christianity as idolatry, because we've seen it up close. We know what it's about. Christianity asserts that Jesus is God. That's idolatry, man. You're saying that a created man, a creature, is the creator. That's idolatry. That's the worship of a false god. So I get grieved, even though I myself am not Muslim, I get grieved when I see Muslims converting to Christianity because they're kind of going out of the frying pan into the fire. And why do I say out of the frying pan? Well, as I said, I'm not Muslim, so there are things about Islam that I consider to be false. Islam's monotheism is not one of those things that I consider to be false. And worshiping the Creator monotheistically is one of the most important aspects of Judaism. And you might ask, well, are you Jewish? No, I'm not Jewish. I was studying towards conversion, and I think the more and more I studied it, the more I realized that I personally would not make a good convert, because I had seen lots of converts reach what I might describe as terminal mass, and eventually they just go kaboom like a bomb, and they blow up, and their conversion, they bring discredit upon the potential conversion of other non-Jews who might want to become Jewish. And so many of these converts just kind of self-destruct after a while. And it's shameful. So I didn't want to be one of those people, because in my mind, Jews have caught plenty of crap in the last 100 years, and they don't need me becoming Jewish and then going kablooey, kaboom, self-destructing, and bringing some harm upon the Jewish community, the Jewish people. Because the Jewish people are 0.2% of the world's population. They're a very small minority. And so the way I see it, because of the merits of Judaism and the Jewish people, I see them as something to be treasured and preserved. Now, I'm not super educated about Islam, so I can't say one way or the other whether Islam is something that should be preserved, but I do think that Islam's monotheism is something that should be preserved. And I don't think it's right that so many millions of Muslims should be turned into idol worshippers just because Western governments want that to happen. And I'm not sure they want that to happen, because Western governments are usually trying to suppress and oppress Christianity also. I think Western governments would prefer that every religious person in the world would become an atheist. And so when you talk about maybe American governments engaging in intrigues against religious people, in your case, Muslims, I don't doubt you for a second, because I've seen how they are with religions with which I'm more familiar, like Christianity and Judaism. So I have little doubt that they would do the same thing to Islam. So I'm against Muslims converting to Christianity, but I do have some complaints about Islam that are usually also leveled by Christian missionaries. But one of my complaints is that Islam has a tendency to just go around spilling people's blood for no good reason, rather than considering life sacred even when it's not the life of a non-Muslim. The West just has a problem with Muslims going around killing people because of their beliefs. Now, mind you, Western governments have no problems about going around and killing people because they want to. So there is some hypocrisy at work there. The other thing that's a complaint is that Western people don't like the idea that Muslims might either defile or marry underage girls. Like maybe they might defile or rape underage non-Muslim girls, or that they might marry underage Muslim girls. And of course the complaint about sexually assaulting non-Muslim females extends to female adults too. And that's just not something that's considered acceptable in the West. And I think those are the two primary complaints that people have about Islam. And that if Islam got rid of those two things, that they would be probably far more accepted in the West. Two other things that I've maybe three. Let's see. One is that Islam seems to have a problem with people who aren't Muslim not following Muslim commandments or observances or whatever they're called in Islam. Like, for example, I don't know if it's every strain of Islam where this is the case, but like you can't smoke within eyesight of a Muslim, even if you're not Muslim. That doesn't fly in America. You can't pull that shit in America. Or maybe drinking. If an American, a free American, is drinking within the eyesight of a Muslim, they're a free American. They're allowed to do that. We don't give a damn that, oh my gosh, your faith is so weak that your beliefs and your practices might be threatened by what some other person does. If you're so strong in your faith, why can't you look at a person who smokes or drinks and it doesn't affect you? Because you're committed to your religion. But somehow your faith is so weak that you're tempted by that? It doesn't recommend Islam when you go trying to impose your choices on free Americans or free Westerners. So that's another thing that doesn't appeal to people about Islam. There's another practice which I'm not sure. I would imagine that this is actually against Islam, but it's something that has been observed happens an awful lot in Islamic countries, and that's men having sex with animals. Well, we don't like that in the West. Now, I'm not sure if that's permitted in Islam or not, but it doesn't seem to be getting punished enough in Islam that it's such a commonplace occurrence that American soldiers can observe you doing that through thermal optics at long distances. They'll see the guy walking out of his house in the middle of the night and then banging a donkey. So, yeah, we're not cool with that either. And then finally, Christians have a problem with this, and that's that Muslims don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God. I don't have any problem with that, because I don't believe in Jesus. Excuse me. Now, I guess in Islam, they believe that Jesus, Isa, was a prophet, I guess. Now, I don't know if that idea came from Muhammad or not, but if that's what Muhammad thought, then Muhammad was a false prophet, because we now have very good evidence that Jesus is actually a literary disguise for the Roman general turned emperor Titus Flavius, and that name Titus means dove. So that when Jesus is being baptized in the Gospels and the dove comes down in the form or the sign of a dove, or rather, they say it's the Holy Spirit coming down in the form or sign of a dove, and then this voice from heaven supposedly says, "This is my beloved Son." It's speaking of the dove. It's letting you know that the dove is that voice's son, and that dove is Titus Flavius. So that the voice from heaven in that passage is the Roman Emperor Vespasian. And the whole Christian myth was cooked up by these Roman Flavian emperors to continue their war against the Jews. They had already destroyed the temple in Jerusalem, but yet they're back in Rome, so they can't really make war with the Jews if they're back in Rome. And there were more Jewish communities all over the known world than just in Judea. And I guess a Roman army couldn't just go jet-setting all over the known world and exterminating all those Jewish communities as they sought to do in the first century. So instead, they create this Christian myth, this religion that inoculates non-Jews against both Judaism and the Jewish people. It teaches non-Jews to see the Jewish people in the worst light in any given situation, whether it's to believe that Jews are dumb and don't know their own scriptures, which is completely laughable because they're the only people under heaven who know the original language of the Hebrew Tanakh. Or it's that maybe they can read their scriptures, but they don't know what their scriptures really meant. And that somehow non-Jews who accept Jesus become emperors in become experts in Jewish scripture all of a sudden. Or it paints Jews as always being liars, or always being sinners, or always being hypocrites, when any of these things could be applied to non-Jews just as easily. But of course, non-Jews aren't going to think these things about themselves. How much easier is it to believe these things about such a small minority as the Jewish people, only being 0.2% of the world's population. There are people who are very easy to hate, and you don't really have to worry that they're going to come punch you in the face for your hateful speech, because there's so few of them, right? It's a cowardly position to take, to hate the Jewish people. This is why the Christian missionaries, most of them, they'll go after Jews, trying to convert Jews, but they're afraid to go after Muslims, because there are many more Muslims in the world than there are Jews. And Muslims have been known to defend themselves violently, whereas Jews place sanctity on an individual person's life, and they're not prone to just going and lashing out and spilling someone's blood just because of what they say. So these are the problems that the West has with Islam, and there seems to be a race to get Muslims infected with Western atheism and Western pleasure-seeking before Islam expands enough to establish itself as a majority in all of these Western nations. So even though these Western nations have brought these Muslims into their countries in such great numbers recently that it has become alarming to the citizens of those countries who have been there for thousands of years, it seems like their strategy is to get these Muslims westernized before the Western nations become Islamized. Is that the word? Muslimized? I don't know. In other words, become Islamic or brought under Sharia law. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is such an effective strategy on the part of Westerners. But let's say that these videos are telling the truth, and that Muslims really are leaving Islam or losing their faith in Islam. In that case, I want to show them that there is another option that they perhaps have not considered. One that doesn't require them to become an idol worshiper like Christianity does. And that is the path of the righteous Gentile. Sometimes called the Ben Noach, or the B'nai Noach, the children of Noah, the sons of Noach, the descendants of Noach. I think you call him Nuh in Arabic. I'm not sure. Anyway, so basically this is the path for the non-Jewish person in order to live righteously according to the Torah revealed through the Creator's servant Moses at Mount Sinai. Now this path was known and was popular before the Roman Flavians invented Christianity. And this is proven by the fact that you could look at a drawing or any number of illustrations or paintings of the Second Temple as it existed in the first century, and you will see on either side these two large courts that were part of the court of the Gentiles, the court of the non-Jews, or the court of the nations of the world. And that's because there were these righteous Gentiles who were attracted to monotheism, and they would make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem annually, I assume if they could afford it. And there they would provide offerings and sacrifices on their own behalf, in service to the Creator. But when the Roman Flavians destroyed the temple and then invented Christianity as a means to inoculate non-Jewish people against the Torah, against Judaism, against the Jewish people, then this path of excuse me, this path of the righteous Gentile kind of dried up. And these God-fearers, another name for them that are mentioned in the Christian scriptures, who would tend to hang out in the back of the synagogues throughout the non-Jewish world that was known at the time, they ceased to exist in very great numbers. Usually, by that time, if a person was sympathetic towards Judaism, they would just convert to Judaism. However, not everybody finds that easy to do, because you're taking upon yourself quite a great many commandments, and I think that you really have to be part of a Jewish community in order for that to be easier to accomplish. Like if you're trying to maybe live as a member of a Gentile family, or you work in a Gentile setting or a non-Jewish company, where most of the people are not Jewish, and of course the company is not asking you to conduct yourself as a Jew, then it's pretty difficult to meet the requirements for conversion to Judaism, because they're going to be wanting you to pray 3 times a day, of course, attend all of the weekly Sabbaths and the annual Sabbaths, and do so without violating the Sabbath, and then you have to keep the kosher dietary laws, and Gentile foods in the supermarket don't really lend themselves to a kosher diet. There's a lot to it. So, but the non-Jewish person, even today, he can choose the path of the righteous Gentile, and he can observe those commandments that are incumbent upon non-Jews, because there are very many commandments that are specifically for the children of Israel and not for the people of the nations of the world or the Gentiles. So a person can do those and observe those and live righteously and worship monotheistically the Creator, the deity of the Hebrew Bible, and it even talks about, in the construction and the dedication of the temple in Jerusalem in King Solomon's day, that a non-Jewish person could come to Jerusalem and they could pray toward the temple and their prayers would be answered. So we see that even before Christianity, there are proofs that non-Jews could access and worship and serve the deity of the Hebrews without needing some human sacrifice like Christianity asserts. Christianity tries to assert that Gentiles were completely cut off from any access to or service towards the Creator, and that the only thing that fixed this was a human sacrifice of Jesus, and that's just not in harmony with the Hebrew Tanakh at all. But Christianity has to come up with all these reasons for why the first century Christians believed a lot of the things they did, when the real reason that the Christians in the last 30 years of the first century believed some of the things they did is because the Roman Flavian emperors cooked up this religion and they had the power and the means to disseminate and distribute this religion throughout the empire. So it was probably something like a mystery cult, a Roman Flavian mystery cult, where most of the adherents didn't know the real mysteries of the cult, which was that Jesus was a literary disguise for Titus Flavius. But Christianity promoted this hatred of Jews because it was just a continuation of this Roman Flavian military campaign against the Jews, where they exterminated Jewish men, women, children, even the unborn babies in the pregnant woman's belly. These Romans exterminated them. And so you have to wonder, how much hatred must that have taken for the Jews? Then to lay siege to Jerusalem, to breach its walls, then to lay siege to the temple, then to burn it down. Come on, these Romans didn't love the Jews. And they created a religion that promoted hatred of the Jews. Then, later, Islam was partially derived from Christianity, and it inherited a lot of this hatred of the Jews from Christianity. So now, in our day, we have these two world religions, one of them idolatrous, Christianity, that hates the Jews. They say they don't. They say they love the Jews. They say they're Zionists. But when you really, drill down to the nitty-gritty, they hate the Jews. They just don't realize that they hate the Jews sometimes. But the things that they teach are expressions of hatred towards the Jews. Then you have Islam, who makes no bones about the fact that they hate the Jews. So in that way, at least they're honest. And they would like to exterminate the Jews. They'd like to do the very same thing that the Roman Flavians were doing to the Jews. So you've got these two world religions that hate the Jews, one of them idolatrous, the other one monotheistic, namely Islam. And both of them are inoculating non-Jewish people against the path of the God-fearer, against the path of the righteous Gentile. The original monotheism. So, I'm just saying that if you're thinking of leaving Islam or you've lost your faith in Islam, there is a path. Some kind of call it Judaism light, like it's a light form of Judaism, or diet Judaism, without all the fat and sugar. I don't know. But but it is the path for the non-Jewish person, and you can learn the commandments that a non-Jewish person are supposed to do and how to live righteously in the eyes of the Creator. That's an option for you. If you don't want to become an idolater by joining Christianity, you can always restore the path of the righteous Gentile. There are already some of us. I mean, I think it's become more popular since about the 1950s. I think Vendel Jones is considered one of the first more popular righteous Gentiles, or Noachides, Ben Noach. And I'm not sure if he's still alive, but I think he believed that Indiana Jones was modeled after him, I think, because I guess he he engaged in some searching for the Ark of the Covenant in Judea at some point in his life, so I guess he drew a parallel between Steven Spielberg's Indiana Jones character and himself, and I don't know how much of that is true, because I've also heard other people claim that they were the real Indiana Jones. But so this movement of the path of the righteous Gentile, it's been around for, what is it now, almost 80 years. I think it's become more popular, but it's still a very, very, very small minority in the West, because people can already opt for Christianity, which is a very easy religion to become part of. You just say the sinner's prayer and you're in there, right? It's super easy. It is the broad road to destruction in Matthew chapter 7. Pauline Christianity, which is most Protestant Christianity these days, versus some of the earlier forms of Jewish messianism that may have later been transformed or retooled into Christianity, like the Ebionites and the Netzarim, or the Nazarenes, or the in Hebrew Evyonim, the poor ones, the Ebionites. But those guys aren't really around much anymore. Even in the mid-90s, you could find websites for both the Netzarim and the Ebionites, but there just weren't many of them, and I don't think that I haven't heard about much growth of those sects of Christianity, who, mind you, did not believe that Jesus was God, and who did believe that you were supposed to keep the commandments of the Torah. So, but anyway, there it is. There's your option. You know, you can, if you want to worship God monotheistically, you can adopt the path of the righteous Gentile. Now, keep in mind that if you go to a synagogue, a Jewish synagogue, their liturgy is for Jews. Everything about what they do there is designed for Jews. Like, you can show up as a respectful Ben Noach or Noahide or righteous Gentile, but I think you're going to notice that everything there is geared towards the Jewish people, because when those God-fearers, when that God-fearer community, or those B'nai Noach, kind of dried up and evaporated with the destruction of the temple and the creation of Christianity and then Islam, then the synagogues became empty of non-Jews. And you could see that to this day, that non-Jews have been so completely programmed against the Jewish perspective that non-Jews don't even consider going to an Orthodox Jewish synagogue to learn more about the Hebrew Scriptures. They will much sooner turn to their pastor, a Gentile, to tell them what the Hebrew Scriptures mean, because, again, the Christian Scriptures programmed them that either A, Jews are dumb, don't know their own Scriptures, or Jews aren't inspired, so they don't understand the real spiritual meaning of their Scriptures, or that Jews always lie, or that Jews are hypocrites, and then they see that they believe that Jews are basically antichrists, and because they don't accept that Jesus is the Son of God, even though All of the children of Israel are called God's son in the book of Exodus, right? But they just don't believe that Jesus is God's son in the way that Christians think that Jesus is God's son. So then they don't go to the Jewish people to learn more about the Hebrew scriptures and what they mean. They just completely discount that, and you never, or at least hardly ever, see them in an Orthodox Jewish synagogue. So the God-fearer movement, as it existed in the first century, probably is not much of a thing in this day and age. I can't speak for all Jewish synagogues everywhere in the world. I'm just letting you know that, as long as you're as long as you're not a jerk to Jewish people and you're peaceful and you're not trying to push some kind of agenda on them, then they may tolerate your presence in a synagogue, and they may even involve you in some of their joyous occasions. But they have to know that you're a peaceful person and that you're not a threat. Because they're not trying to die today. You understand? So, to recap, I'm not crazy about the news that Muslims are, assuming it's true news, that Muslims are leaving Islam either to become atheists or to become Christians. Atheists because they're departing from their worship and service of God, and Christians because they're becoming idol worshippers. They're worshiping a mere man as a god. I would rather that Muslims, even if they're leaving Islam, become righteous Gentiles and continue in their monotheism and continue pursuing the path of righteousness. So that's just my perspective, my opinion. I think Muslims have already been warned against Christianity, so I'm not sure why Muslims would be persuaded to turn to idolatry unless it's because it's an easier path, or because I guess they've lost faith in Islam and they don't know what other options are available to them. But now I've let you know what one of those options is. Thank you for listening.